Good morning, AIMHO. I am Shady and Say from the AIMHO 365 Committee, and I want to welcome you to the AIMHO 365 webinar, Burnout, presented by Emilie Nemchak. A big thank you to you, Emilie, for developing this presentation and offering to share your knowledge with the region. As a reminder, this webinar will be recorded and uploaded to our AIMHO 365 YouTube page, and the link will be available through the AIMHO.org website. Please be checking the website often for future webinars and to submit webinar proposals. At the end of this webinar, there will be a short survey, so if you have time and don't mind filling it out, we would greatly appreciate it. Again, a huge thank you to our presenter today. Emilie, we're all yours.
Okay, hello everybody. I am going to be talking today about burnout and just a little background of who I am. I'm Emilie Nemchak. I'm the AIMHO Entry-Level Member at Large, and I'm also a Residence Life Coordinator and the RHA Advisor at Colorado School of Mines. And today I wanted to talk about burnout because I've noticed over the past few years of being a grad student and then working full-time in higher education that we all seem to typically assign burnout and stress as the same thing, but after doing some research and actually experiencing burnout myself last year, I realized they're very different, and I think it's very important that we start dismantling the belief that they are interchangeable and that they're one and the same. And so this presentation is something that I adapted from a training that we did with our residence life staff back in early January. And so I really found it helpful for our student staff to hear, and we got a lot of good feedback. So I wanted to adapt it a little bit to make it more suited for professional staff, and I wanted to share it out with you all too to see if this would be helpful. So going forward in burnout, I'm not going to show these videos, but what we did with our students was we showed them two videos, one that talked about stress and one that talked about burnout. The stress video is very scary. It's this guy with a GoPro on, and he's scaling a skyscraper, and his GoPro is aimed down, and it is frightening. If you don't like heights, don't watch it. But we showed it to our staff, and you can see the effects of stress. Like they were shrinking in their chairs, their heart rates were up. Some of them were like, "Don't climb the building." So it was pretty intense. And then the burnout video here, and again, I'm not going to pull it up right now, but I will be happy to send you the link. It's to a TED Talk by Hamza Khan, and he talks about the burnout gamble, and that's actually the title of it if you do want to look it up yourself. And I really love this TED Talk because he talks about burnout in a way that is very relatable to not only people who work full-time, but also to our students. So at Mines, our students are very high achieving. They come in, they're valedictorians, they've held every leadership position known to man, they've already traveled abroad, they're used to getting to the top. And I love his message because in the beginning, he tells everyone, I'm a recovering overachiever, don't be an overachiever, it's not worth it, and it can end up harming you. And he says it in such a blunt way that I noticed a lot of our students just suddenly perked up and kind of watched him because that's not what they've been told, right? I think our society has been very obsessed with people who start their own company by the age of 22 and who are also amazing athletes and are on an Olympic team and also going to college full time at some super intense school, and they're still able to do hobbies and go out to dinner with their friends. So just this big message of overachieving. And I like Hamza's message because he talks about how he was an overachiever and all the things he did and what eventually led to his burnout, and how he argues against that ideal of putting an overachiever on a pedestal because it is detrimental. So again, I'm happy to share these links out later after this video, but I really like that TED Talk a lot. So another thing we showed people is just the different effects of burnout. And so we had this fun little comic over here on the left-hand side for our student staff. And then since we're STEM focused here at Mines, we had a picture of a good old brain. And so this photo of the brain shows the state of relaxation and then when the brain is stressed, and you can see the visual differences between what goes on in your brain depending on whether you're at that relaxed state or that stressed state. And then I really like the graphic above that with just the stress versus burnout, because these bullet points are essentially what I'm going to be talking about today, but they're just very, short and sweet and to the point. So for example, stress, it talks about reactive or overreactive emotions. And with burnout, it's a little different. It's disengagement, blunted emotions. For stress and burnout, it's lost or diminished energy, and then burnout is motivation itself is lost or diminished. So I really like this graphic. I think it does a great job of just kind of summarizing what I'll be talking about today, but it does that comparison side by side. So you can see why stress and burnout are different and why we should kind of work on not using them interchangeably whenever we describe how we're feeling or how our students are feeling. So moving forward, what I really would like you all to do is think about whether or not you can recognize burnout in yourself. What does it look like to you? And in this, we ask the students to look, to reflect on this after seeing the TED Talk by Hamza Khan. But something that I want you all to think about is, have you ever recognized burnout in yourself? And if you have, what does that look like for you? How did you work through your burnout? For those of you that may still feel like you're burnt out, what does that feel like to you right now? Does it make you think back to that little graphic of stress versus burnout and say, oh yeah, it is very different from stress, and here's why? And so obviously if you're around people right now, feel free to talk about it a little bit with them of what your burnout looks like compared to how you feel when you're stressed. But I think this is important to do because I don't think we really take the time to reflect on how we're feeling when we're burnt out or if we're getting burnt out until we're really in it. And that's something that happened to me, is I didn't really reflect on it or notice it until I was really deep into it. And so that's something I encourage you all to do, whether it's right now or whether it's after this webinar, is to think about what burnout looks like for you, because it does look different for certain people. However, there are some stages we're going to be talking about, and I know some of you may still be asking, why are we even talking about burnout? So I want to recognize your jobs are difficult. I don't even need to know your exact job title. I just know if you work in higher education in any capacity, especially residence life or operations or facilities or training or in a leadership role, you have a difficult job. And your role demands a lot from you. I know a lot of us are used to late nights, long training days, really late phone calls, conversations with students that are really tough. And for example, right now, we're in the midst of RACA selection. So after this webinar, I have to run to an interview with an RA candidate. So it demands a lot from us. And also on top of that, we're human. And I think that's the part that tends to get a little lost. And this goes a little into work-life balance versus work-life integration. But I think we forget that, yes, our jobs are difficult, and yes, they demand a lot from us, and that's stress itself, but we're also humans dealing with a lot of other complex things in our lives that can lead us to burnout, such as if you have a partner, that's also a demanding role. If you have a pet, a child, if you're a parent, if you are a caregiver, if you're into a really intense hobby, or if you work a second job, or if you're studying, you're a student or a part-time student. We all have different other facets of our life, and burnout is really the culmination of a bunch of different stress that just compacts on top of each other over a long period of time. So I want to recognize that, yes, there might be some stuff in your role that's causing you to feel burnt out, but I also want to recognize that there could be stuff going on in our lives that also lead to burnout too. So I hope that this is more applicable overall and not just in the current role that you're in. I hope that this gets you all thinking about burnout in general. So this is a slide I'm going to stick on for a while. I'm going to talk about these stages. So when I was feeling burnt out, I didn't know that there were 12 stages of burnout until I started doing research. And again, I referred back to the TED Talk that Hamza Khan did because he talks about these 12 stages too, but I'm going to talk a little bit more about them in depth. So going through these, I remember when I first looked at these, I was like, oh my goodness, I was at number 8 before I even noticed I was burnt out or that there was a problem. And it turns out in the research, that's pretty common. So that's why I want to share these with you and talk through them, because I don't want you all to get further down the chain before you realize you're burnt out. It doesn't mean that you can't work through burnout that far into the 12 stages. It just means it might be harder. So if we're able to kind of reflect more and catch ourselves in these beginning stages, we can do a better job of helping each other out and helping our students, our staff, our friends, our family, if they're feeling burnt out as well. So the first stage of burnout is excessive ambition. And this is something that Hamza talks about in his TED Talk of it's ambition, but without clear goals. So for a lot of us, I would say a lot of folks identify as being ambitious. And that's not a bad thing. It becomes an issue if you're excessively ambitious and the things that you're focusing on don't have a clear end goal. So you're very scattered, you're very spread thin, you're doing projects that don't really relate to the work that you do in your role or that you're passionate about. You're just kind of putting your time towards that. Or you're creating these really, really big challenges for yourself that may not go together well. They may not mesh well. So for example, when I was starting my burnout, I'm going to use myself as an example through this. So it's also part of being vulnerable. So I'm going to try to role model that. So in April 2017 last year, we went through a really big transition in our department where all of my coworkers ended up leaving for other jobs, which was fine. We expected it. And then my supervisor was promoted to director, and our assistant director was promoted to associate director. And then it was me, a little RLC. And so I was doing all the RLC stuff for all the buildings, and then my supervisors were still trying to learn their new roles in addition to still doing their old roles and also trying to find new folks. So that was a lot. But in the midst of that, in April, one of my family friends passed away suddenly at the age of 48. And I didn't have time to go to her funeral. And I just kind of pushed it away. I was like, it's fine. Like, we're going to get through this work. And then the summer hit, and I didn't really get that lull that we typically see in the summer because I had to oversee all the summer staff and accrue interns and all of that work. And then I decided to also train for a marathon because why not? And then I also started a second master's program in an area that I wasn't really passionate about because why not? So that's the excessive ambition, is you keep pushing and pushing yourself in these directions that don't really have paths that align. They're just kind of out there, and you don't really know why you're doing them. You just keep doing them. You keep taking that time away and that energy away from other things and putting it towards these other places. And then stage 2 is you push yourself to work harder. And I know we always say sometimes, I don't know if all of us do, but sometimes it's that, put your head down, get the work done type of mentality. But this is, you're already operating at 100% and you just go harder. And so I equate this to, for those of us that work in residence life, I equate this to not having the breaks that we typically get. So I think a lot of us can think of times where we're like, oh yeah, that's our high energy month. And so for me, I know that at the end of July and then August and September, it's going to be go, 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 because that's move-in, that's training, it's the first 6 weeks of school, all that good stuff. And then I know it kind of peters off a little bit, and then it gets a little busier around November for finals, and then it kind of peters out in December because we have a break, we have winter break. But when you push yourself to work harder, especially if you've already got that excessive ambition going, you're basically operating, the way I like to think about it is you're operating like every day is move-in day. Like that's your level of output of work. Every day is move-in day. You're going hard, you're not stopping. You are just so focused in this and getting it done. And so you just keep pushing and pushing and working at 110%. The next step is neglecting personal care and needs. And so this one starts to relate a little bit to number 5, but it takes away from things that you do to make yourself feel better and that also help support you in your role, that help you feel refreshed, right? Coming back to your role. So for example, when I was in my burnout, I went I think 5 months without getting a haircut, which if you've met me, my hair needs to be cut at least a month and a half every time because it's a weird hairstyle. But I just put it off. And then I was a big runner. I was training for a marathon, and I was terrible at it because I would just keep pushing my running days off because I was like, nope, I need to get this done. This needs my attention, not this. And I started neglecting my relationship needs. I didn't see my friends for months because I just needed to work. Number 4 is displacement of conflict. This is where you start to see your work or other things in your life start to slip and people start to take notice. So that's when maybe your supervisor comes up and says, hey, I noticed that you were working on this project. I haven't heard back from you. What's going on with it? And you're like, I can't talk about it right now. I'm so busy. You don't even understand. And so you just start pushing off that conflict or that feedback of, hey, we're noticing that you're not really yourself right now. You just keep pushing it back. Number 5 is changes in values to indicate self-worth. So this is dangerous, and Hamza talks about this in the TED Talk, and so does the research, because our values aren't supposed to change, right? Our values are supposed to be things that are pretty concrete that guide us through our lives and are the reason why we do anything, why we have certain relationships, why we work where we work, or what we work in, or what we study. And when you start to change your values to fit what's going on with the excessive ambition, working harder, that's when it starts to be dangerous. So if you value family, and you start putting family needs off because you're like, no, I just need to get all these projects done, I have to do this, that's a little dangerous. Or if you really value self-care through physical activity and you've noticed that you've gone a month without biking or going to the gym or doing yoga, that's a problem. Number 6 is when you start to deny those problems and you start to shift blame. So, if your supervisor says, hey, that project, what happened? What's going on? Well, it's not a problem. It's fine. I'll get it done. It's not even my fault. I have all these other projects going on. It's not even my problem right now. So you start to shift that blame still. And then that leads to social withdrawal. You start withdrawing from your support system. It starts to feel like everyone's out to get you and you can't make anyone happy. So you start withdrawing. Number 8 is the one I talked about where I was at before I realized that I was burnt out. And I would say it was probably in October. So this past October, my father passed away, which again, like stacking on the stress for burnout, right? And it was unexpected. And then a week and a half later, I had to go to IACHR. And then a week after that, I had to go to AIMHO. And then 2.5 weeks after that, it was my marathon. Oh my gosh, look at all the things. Look at all that burnout. But so for obvious behavior changes, I'm usually a very positive person. If you've met me, you're probably like, pretty positive is a very kind way to put it. You are very energetic, Emily. You need to simmer. So the fact that I was not very positive during this time, I was mean. I will own it. I was blunt. I was rude. Someone would say a suggestion. I would be like, nope, we're not doing that. Stop. I hate it. We're done. And that's not who I am. And when I started doing that on a repeated scale, like every day I was doing this to someone, I realized that something was up. And that's when I found this research and I thought, oh, look at that. I'm burnt out. After number 8, it gets very scary. So thankfully, I don't think I went into any of these, but you have a confusion of identity. So you start asking, why are you even doing any of this? Why does it matter? Does it even matter? And then it goes to inner emptiness, which leads into depression. And then according to the research of Herbert and Gale, there is an inevitable either mental or physical collapse. Your body just gives out. And Hamza talks about this because he says the moment he realized he was burnt out was he had to go on a plane and he couldn't get himself to get up to go to the airport. He just kept sitting there watching the clock tick by and he just couldn't do it. And so I wanted to spend a lot of time on these because I found it very helpful when I was working through my burnout, but I didn't realize I was burnt out till number 8. So I wanted to share this with you all because I think it's a very helpful tool. If you're feeling burnt out, if you want to just teach your staff more about what it is to be burnt out, I think this is very helpful. So hopefully you got some stuff out of this, and I hope that it kind of changed your way of thinking, especially since we're going to lead into talking about stress versus burnout again. So when it comes to society and burnout, we still use those terms interchangeably. And that's fair because I don't think we've ever really taken the time to portion out the two of them and say, no, these are different. So I'm sure that you've heard this before from your staff or your students of, I'm really stressed, and sometimes they'll say, I'm really burnt out. But we kind of think that they're the same thing, and we kind of prescribe treatments, in quotes, the same way we would for either one of them, which is not something we should do. So even though burnout is a long-term buildup of stress, we've been told that it can be fixed quickly as if we just had a stressful week. So how many of you have been told to just take a day off or go home early or just watch some Netflix? Or have you told your staff that? I know I have. My staff have told me they're stressed, so I say just take a 3-day weekend. Get off campus, go see a movie, go see your friends, and then come back, you'll feel refreshed. If you say that to someone who's burnt out, though, it can't be solved in a weekend. We're talking months and months of built upon stress, and not just, stress of daily work. We're talking about, for example, for me, it was 2 deaths that were unexpected, 2 very close relatives that had died. It was excessive ambition that I was putting on myself. It was being the only RLC for a while and having a bunch of other responsibilities on top of that, and then helping the new staff be onboarded. So it's not just little things, it's big things that just kind of pack on top of each other. And so what I really want to do, and hopefully that I've started with this webinar, is we need to start dismantling the belief that burnout is the same as stress, and it can be solved in a short period of time or doing one activity. And sometimes, even if you're stressed, that can't be solved with a weekend, right? And with burnout, the first few stages of burnout, it may feel like stress. And I think that's where we do that reflection. So we're feeling stressed, and we're like, okay, let's think about it. Am I feeling stressed or am I feeling burnt out? Is this a precursor to burnout? Maybe try those things that do help you when you're stressed. But a big telling sign is if you do those things that normally help you feel refreshed and reset and ready to go, if you do those and it still doesn't work, then that means that you might be heading towards some burnout and that you need to start working on it in a different way. So what are those ways that I can work on, Emily? Well, here you go, friends. So first is start simple. And these can also work with stress too, but the long-term ones are the ones that really help with burnout too. The first one is set boundaries and stick to them. So this was really hard for me to do because I love people. And so of course I want to talk to them all the time. But I realized last year, especially when we were so short-staffed, that I needed to set these boundaries for myself. And so one of my boundaries that I stick to that my staff knows very well now is if I'm not on duty, and they can tell because we have a duty calendar, if I'm not on call and it's 5 p.m., I'm done. Do not text me unless it's an emergency. Then you need to be calling up, friends. If you're texting me because of a flood, that's a problem. You need to go back to training. And it also helps them critically think through their actions, which is something they need when they go into the working world. Is they need to think through, okay, I'm about to text Emily. It's 7 p.m. Why am I texting Emily? Is it something that needs her attention right now? If it does, and she's not on call, I need to be calling up instead of texting her. Or is this something I could put in an email that she'll see tomorrow and is not an emergency? So it really helped me kind of set that structure for them. And then it also helped me because once 5 p.m. hit, I was able to then go to, what I needed to do to take care of myself, whether that was go to therapy, whether that was go to CrossFit, go for a run, see my partner. Just having that boundary in place was really key and sticking to that. So if someone texted me after 5 p.m. and it was something that could have waited till tomorrow, I told them that. I would send a text back and say, email this to me. And that was it. And so now they're at a point where I very rarely get those texts. And so that's something I've really set for myself. The other one is check in with yourself physically. I did not do this well, and I ended up getting really sick at the end of last year after my marathon. And so I recommend checking in with yourself, whether that's doing a body scan. If any of you have done yoga, you just kind of scan. You start at the top of your head. How's your head feeling? How are your eyes feeling? Nose, throat, are you relaxing your shoulders? You kind of work your way down. Or if you just want to check in while you're walking to a meeting and say, okay, how am I feeling? How's my heart rate doing? How's my breathing? How are my shoulders? Just check in with yourself because your body will give you warning signs if you're not your best. And so pay attention to those warning signs. I feel terrible because sometimes people just push themselves and they feel like they have to come to work when they're not feeling super great. And again, this is maybe based on how your work environment is, but I really hope that you have people who are supportive in your office to tell you to go home. If you're not feeling well, go home. Pinpoint what has led to your burnout. And this may be hard. It took some really deep reflection from me after my marathon to figure out why I was so burnt out. Because I thought it was just the work, right? When my office hired all of the new RLCs, I was like, oh my God, great. Like, it'll be fine. Everything's going to get back to normal. And it didn't. So I was at a loss because I was like, well, if it's not work, what is it? What's causing me to feel this way? And again, it took that reflection that I hadn't been doing. And so think about what stressors have been leading you to this point, because it might be work, it might not be work, it might be a mix of both. So take some time to reflect on that. The other one is ask for help and know that help may come in a variety of forms. This is so hard because it asks us to be vulnerable. And if you're, I don't know if this is just me, this is how I view it. If you are very overachieving, it's hard to be seen as a very strong person. And for some reason, we equate asking for help and as weakness. And Brene Brown, you know her, she talks about that all the time. But asking for help is key. And I was not good at asking for help until I was at that deep stage in burnout. And then I was asking everyone. I went to my support system. I told them what was going on. For me, it helped to get a therapist, and she was amazing because she also was like, oh, yeah, you're hella burnt out. And I was like, thank you, therapist. So just something to know. I'm driving through a tunnel. I'm so sorry. I hope this sounds better. Long term, seek out mental health professionals, and this really depends on your ability. I get that. I understand that this is coming from a privileged area because I do have access to mental health professionals who are covered under my health insurance, and some people may not. And I really hope you do. If you do not have that access, let me know, because I actually have a PDF of all the free national and some regional mental health professionals that we give to our students if they tell us that that's a barrier for them to get mental health. So again, email me after this. I'm happy to send that to you if that can help you out too. If you're not feeling the mental health professional route, that's fine. Communicate with your support group. That is huge. I told my partner what was going on, and he was a big support system. He was kind of my accountability buddy, especially when it came to the next point, which is stick to your boundaries. He was the one who was like, Emily, put your laptop away. It can wait till tomorrow. Emily, is anyone going to be hurt or get lost or not be living if you don't look at this email right now? No? Okay, then you need to put the computer away. And that really helped me. So communicate with your support group, whatever your support group looks like. The next one is unplug, seriously unplug, and this is hard. I recognize that. And if you're able to, though, if you are off the clock and you don't have any other work responsibilities, I encourage you to not take your laptop with you. Don't take your phone with you. Turn it off. Put on the do not disturb option if you have an iPhone. I really found that to be super helpful. So when I went away on the weekend, I wasn't away, but also checking my emails. I was gone. I was out of there. And that really helped me when I was working through my burnout. The other one is know that working through burnout is going to take some time, but that's okay. It really is okay. I, again, being an overachiever, was like, I'm going to be the best at burnout. I'm going to beat it in like 3 days. That was not the thing. I would say now I feel like I'm mostly through burnout. I'm still kind of working on some stuff, but I mean, this is, almost February, and I was burnt out since April of last year. Not to scare anyone, I'm just saying give yourself that grace to work through burnout, because it's going to take a little bit. How do I prevent burnout? So for this one, again, we talked about establishing your support system, understand what you need from work and what you need from your personal life. I put this on here because I don't know if it'll be super helpful. I think it will. It's the 6 virtues of a dream company. And I want to preface this by saying I found it helpful when I was reflecting through burnout and was like, it's because of my work. And this helped me realize that it wasn't just because of my work. So this doesn't mean that if your work doesn't meet any of these that you should quit. It just means that Harvard Business Review did a study, and these were the 6 virtues that they found of a dream company. And so I'll just leave those up there. I won't talk through all of them, but I know when I was burnt out and trying to figure out where it was coming from, this really helped me. And so I encourage you to kind of reflect on that. It might be helpful for you. It might not. That's totally fine. I just wanted to throw it out there. The last 2 points may be things that you've heard before, but I really encourage you to focus on them. So have a creative outlet that is not tied to your work and make it a priority. So I go to CrossFit every other day, every morning, and that's my time. And if anyone ever tried to schedule, I don't think they would, it's at 6:30 in the morning, but if anyone ever tried to take that away from me, you better have a good reason, like no friends. So I make that a priority. Another one is to stick to your boundaries, again, and have real conversations about those boundaries. So if you're struggling to have those boundaries met, or people are not respecting them, talk that through with someone, whether that's your staff isn't respecting them or your supervisor isn't respecting them. There's a way to have those conversations. I know it's really tough, but again, you're advocating for yourself, and that's really hard to do. It's being vulnerable again. But I encourage you to have those conversations with folks about the why you need these boundaries, and how they can help you stick to them too. So that's all I have for the webinar right now. I hope it was helpful. That's my name, that's my email address. If you wanted any of those resources I talked about, I'm happy to send them to you. If you want this PowerPoint, I'm happy to see you can edit it, do your thing. But I hope this was helpful for you all, and I hope you learned a little bit more about the differences between stress and burnout. And I just want to thank you for joining us today. That was amazing.
Awesome. Thank you, Emily. We really appreciate you taking the time to share your knowledge in this area with the region. The association really appreciates what you do for our members. As a reminder, this webinar was recorded and will be posted on the AIMHO 365 YouTube page, and the link will be available through the AIMHO website for your future review. Please be on the lookout for future webinars by checking the AIMHO 365 page on the AIMHO website. We do have 2 more that are already scheduled, so make sure to check those out and add them to your calendars. Again, a huge thank you from the region to you, Emily, for this presentation today. Have a great day, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.